but for some reason, the water's coming right back out.
You can see when he turns the water on, it shoots out.
Somewhere beneath the Uintah Basin, Dwayne Ollinger believed there was $3 billion in gold waiting to be found, and he spent everything he had trying to prove it. Along the way, instead of gold, he built a family fans couldn't help but fall in love with. But not everyone who walked onto that ranch is still standing today. What really happened to them? And what did it cost each one to be part of this story? These are the tragic stories of 10 people connected to Blind Frog Ranch. Stay till the end, because the last name on this list will change how you see the whole show.
The Quantum team analyzed thousands of drone scans of the 160-acre ranch and discovered one area in particular to be very unusual.
Dwayne Ollinger. With an unshakable belief that made him a fan favorite, Dwayne Ollinger was known as the man chasing $3 billion in lost Aztec gold. Yet that same drive turned out to be the thing that finally wore him down, because he kept pushing long after his body was ready to give out. Dwayne owned Blind Frog Ranch in Utah, and he built Discovery's mystery at Blind Frog Ranch around his belief that the gold was buried somewhere in the flooded caves beneath his land. He led his son, Chad, and a rotating crew of geologists and investigators into those caves season after season, never once giving up, even when the gold never turned up. Yet there was one thing working against him that most fans never saw. Years before his final season, Dwayne Ollinger was diagnosed with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, a disease that slowly destroys the nerves controlling the muscles, taking away a person's ability to move, speak, and eventually even breathe on their own, with no cure to stop it. But despite how bad it was, he kept it silent and kept filming, even as the disease slowly took more from him. Then came the strokes, several of them over the course of just a couple of years, each one chipping away at his strength a little more. By the time season 6 began, Dwayne could no longer lead the search on camera, and Josh Feldman stepped in to carry it forward. That came at a terrible cost. On June 2nd, 2026, Dwayne died in the ICU of a hospital in Amarillo, Texas, from respiratory failure brought on by pneumonia, with ALS still working against him the whole time. He was 68. His close friend Ryan Skinner shared the news, and fellow crew member Emery Smith confirmed Dwayne died from respiratory arrest, just hours after being warned his health had suddenly taken a turn. Now, the next person on our list dealt with trouble in a very different way.
Here's what we're going to do. This is going to sound a little sketchy, and I know this is going to be dangerous. But for us to physically get that box out of there, we're going to need to drag it out with some heavy-ass chains tied around there. The easiest way to do that is just to lower them down on top of the box.
Chad Olinger. He walked onto Blind Frog Ranch as his father's right hand, and the world would spend the next 5 seasons watching him take on the risks nobody else on the crew wanted. This man was Chad Olinger, Dwayne Ollinger's son, married with 4 children, who gave up running his own crop dusting business back in Texas to chase his father's search full-time. He moved into a renovated bus just to stay close to the ranch, choosing life on the road over a life above ground. And he would spend the next several years doing the jobs that scared everyone else off, diving into flooded caves, piloting underwater drones, crawling into tunnels nobody else would touch. Soon, he became known as the crew's fearless one, the man they sent in first when something needed doing. This reputation quickly caught the audience's attention, making him one of the show's most talked about faces. But there was a huge problem. Off camera, trouble had already started catching up with him. In November 2024, police tried to pull Chad over in Amarillo, Texas. He ran a red light on his Harley-Davidson, led them on a short chase, then tried to escape on foot, and was charged with 2 counts of evading arrest. Then came something far worse. By late 2025, Chad was being held in Las Vegas as a fugitive wanted in another state. On the night of December 26, 2025, guards doing a routine check found his cellmate, 42-year-old Christopher Kelly, lying dead in their shared cell from blunt force injuries. Chad was rebooked, this time on an open murder charge, with prosecutors still deciding whether to file it as first or second degree. As of now, the case remains open, and nobody knows what comes next for Chad. But when it comes to the Blind Frog Ranch, his future is over.
Hey guys, come here. Let's check this out. The holes the trespassers dug are all full of water now. Water everywhere.
This whole thing is super unstable.
That's ready to collapse right there.
Ryan Skinner. Next on our list is the man who left mystery at Blind Frog Ranch, not because of health, not because of the law, but because he felt the show stopped making room for what he actually came there to do. That man is Ryan Skinner, the crew's Uintah Basin expert, longtime friend of Duane Ollinger, and the man who walked away from a national television show rather than keep showing up for a role that kept shrinking. Skinner had been part of the crew across 10 episodes between 2023 and 2025, bringing his knowledge of the region's strange history and folklore to a show that leaned heavily on mystery as much as excavation. When his appearances thinned out and then stopped, fans noticed. Nobody explained it on screen. When Skinner eventually addressed it himself, the explanation was straightforward. He said his segments kept getting cut for time, that he had pitched producers on a bigger role built around his research, and that when they turned him down, he decided it was not worth staying for a part that no longer used what he brought to the table. So, from all indications, there was no bitterness in how he framed it, no public feud. It was just a man who had made peace with his decision and was willing to explain it plainly, in a post on Facebook rather than a dramatic exit on camera. Fans responded the way Blind Frog Ranch fans usually do, with loyalty. They thanked him for the years he gave the show. They said the Uintah Basin stories were never the same without him. And when Dwayne died in June 2026, it was Skinner, still close with the family, who told them first. But it doesn't end with him. Keep watching, because the next name will change how you see this whole show.
We should put those hydrophones in the next closest body of water and see if we can pick up the signal again.
What do you think, the creek?
Yeah, I think so.
So we need to chase it then.
We got a wild goose in our hand.
Let's go down that creek. Let's go.
Bob Morton. One thing most viewers never got to know about mystery at Blind Frog Ranch was just how much of what Dwayne and Chad found underground meant nothing until someone with a lab coat could actually explain it. You see, they pull out beads, soot, strange metals of caves, and none of it meant anything on its own. And it was those kinds of arrangements that brought in Bob Morton. He showed up on Blind Frog Ranch not to search for treasure, but to prove or disprove it. Dr. Bob Morton, as he was fondly called, was a material scientist and X-ray specialist brought in during Season 3 for one reason only: to figure out what a handful of ancient-looking beads pulled from the ranch actually were. His standout moment came fast. Using X-ray fluorescence, he found traces of gold in the beads and noticed each one had been forged by hand, dating them back to around the 15s, evidence that pointed to Venetian trade beads, not Aztec treasure. It was the kind of finding that could quietly reshape the whole theory of the show. And for one episode, Dr. Morton was the most important man on the ranch. Producers liked what he brought to the table enough to call him back for Season 4, this time to test soot samples pulled from strange vent holes on the property. His analysis came back as charcoal and charred plant material, roughly 500 years old. proof the fires were man-made, not natural. And after that tremendous performance, fans were hit with news that stung in a different way. They wouldn't see him again, not because of death, not sickness, not scandal. Dr. Morton was simply never signed as a full-time cast. His work was episode by episode, brought in strictly for his expertise, tested, and released back to his own career the moment the analysis was done. 2 appearances, 2 years apart, and that was the whole arrangement. Now, as you would find, Bob wasn't the only one hired this way. The next person will shock you.
Yeah. So there's an anomaly there.
Have me pinpoint that exact low. I'll put the sensor right over it.
Drop, drop, drop. Stop.
Right there, it's the bottom of it.
Stefan Burns. Up next is Stefan Burns. Unlike every cast, he spent one single day on Blind Frog Ranch, and it was enough to leave his name in the show's history forever. Stefan Burns was a geophysicist, with his own career already running strong, co-host of Science Channel's Secrets of the Underground, when producers brought him in for Season 2, Episode 6. His job was simple, and that was to walk a magnetometer across a large stretch of the ranch and look for zones of unusual magnetic activity buried underground. That's the whole assignment. 1 episode, 1 task. What he found stayed interesting enough that fans still bring it up. His survey picked up strange electromagnetic signatures that added another layer to the ranch's reputation for the unexplained, giving the show one of its more scientifically grounded moments in an otherwise treasure-hunting narrative. For a man who wasn't even part of the regular crew, it was a memorable contribution, the kind of single scene that outlives an actual season-long arc. But Burns was never part of the Ollinger family's world, and he never came back. He didn't return for Season 3, didn't get pulled back for a follow-up the way Bob Morton was. He came, ran his equipment, handed over his results, and went straight back to his own show and his own research. There was no contract renewal to turn down, no falling out, no health scare, just a 1-episode arrangement that ended exactly when it was supposed to. If you're looking for someone who left Blind Frog Ranch, Burns barely arrived in the first place. He was only ever passing through, and that was the deal from day one.
But I really don't get how we can see something that shows up like a chunk of metal on the GPR, but when we dig, there's nothing there. I was hoping this thing would just light up. I just can't wrap my head around that.
Jaime Doob. He came in with real credentials, spent a full season digging into one of the strangest mysteries the ranch ever produced, and then vanished from the show without a word of explanation. Jaime Doob joined the crew in Season 2 as the investigator, a former police officer who worked patrol duty in the early 1990s before building a long-running interest in unexplained and paranormal cases, something he'd spoken about publicly in a 2014 interview years before Blind Frog Ranch ever cast him. That real-world law enforcement background is exactly why Dwayne brought him in. His task on the show was investigating a mysterious, unsolved suicide connected to the property, a storyline that split fans into 2 camps for years afterward. Those convinced something supernatural was at play, and those convinced the whole thing was staged for the cameras. Over 7 episodes in a single year, Doobie became one of the more credible voices on the show, the guy skeptics pointed to as proof the investigations weren't just theater. Then Season 3 arrived, and he simply wasn't in it. There was no announcement, no farewell scene, nothing on record from Discovery or from Doob himself explaining why. Fan coverage from that era noted the show felt unfocused without him and flagged his absence as one of the odder unexplained gaps in the show's history. Unlike Bob Morton, he was never called back for a follow-up appearance. Unlike Dwayne or Chad, There's no health issue or legal trouble on record to explain the exit. He simply investigated one of the ranch's darkest chapters, appeared in 7 episodes over a single year, and then disappeared from the credits entirely, leaving behind one mystery at Blind Frog Ranch never actually solved, on camera or off it. Now, keep watching because there's more to uncover.
We found it. That cave went way back here all the way towards the ranch. It opens up like huge.
Wow.
There's a couple spots that were super tight, and then it opened up into this like big cavern.
Big cave system?
Yeah.
Forrest Galante. Remember Forrest Galante? The guy famous for tracking down animals the world had already given up for extinction? The host who turned animal planets extinct or alive into appointment viewing. Before any of that made him a household name in the wildlife space, he had one moment on Blind Frog Ranch, Season 1. The episode Someone Was Here called in to help Dwayne's crew make sense of strange animal activity turning up near the mining shafts and cliffside markings. That scene was almost all most Blind Frog Ranch fans ever got to see of him. But it stuck. Viewers noticed him, and more than a few walked away, wanting to see him back on the ranch again. Like the saying goes, though, good things don't always last. And Galante's time on the show turned out to be exactly one of those moments. The reason behind it wasn't something fans were ever told outright, and once you actually look into it, the reason turned out to hunt the show in ways they never expected. While there was no falling out, no scandal, nothing hidden, Galante was simply brought on for a single episode guest contract, one job, one assessment, one appearance, and once that job was done, the show never called him back for a second one. No replacement was ever credited in his specific role either. His kind of expertise just wasn't needed again in that form. What makes it sting a little in hindsight is what came after. Galante didn't need Blind Frog Ranch to keep his career moving. Galante went on to headline Extinct or Alive, host Mysterious Creatures with Forrest Galante, appear across multiple Shark Week specials, and even sit down on the Joe Rogan Experience. He built an entire television career running in parallel to that one brief appearance, leaving Blind Frog Ranch with a single guest credit from a man who went on to become one of the more recognizable names in wildlife TV. In a way, that one episode is the closest thing this show has to a real what if. Now, picture a version of Blind Frog Ranch, where Galante became a recurring voice instead of a single credit. The kind of built-in credibility and crossover pull that could have carried the show to a different level entirely, given how far his own career went from there. That's the quiet tragedy of it. But Galante's story ended quietly, with no drama and no danger involved. What comes next is the exact opposite.
This is a big setback. We had big hopes for this South Cave. Now, I don't know what we're gonna do.
John Gillum. Meet John Gillum, the professional climber hired to solve one very specific problem. Getting 2 men safely down a cliff nobody on the regular crew was equipped to handle. That was the job waiting for him when Blind Frog Ranch brought him on in Season 3 for a 2-episode stretch built entirely around one dangerous sequence, helping Chad Olinger and Ryan Skinner rappel 250 feet down a sheer rock face to reach the entrance of the Mormon Eye Cave, part of the crew's search for the Lost Roads mine. It wasn't a small task. The descent into the Mormon Eye was one of the more physically dangerous stretches the show had filmed to that point, and Gillum's job was to make sure it didn't turn into a real emergency. And here comes the shocker. The descent into the Mormon Eye nearly turned to an emergency anyway. Elsewhere in the same climb, James Keenan suffered a high-altitude health scare. a reminder of just how unforgiving the terrain around Blind Frog Ranch actually is. Gillum's expertise wasn't decorative. It was the difference between a dramatic television sequence and a genuine accident. Once the cliff was behind them and the cave was reached, so was Gillum's job. He appeared across those two connected episodes in December 2023 and was never credited on the show again. There's no health issue behind his exit, no legal trouble, no falling out with producers, just a specialist who was called in for exactly one high-risk task, completed it successfully, and had no reason to come back once it was done. Unlike Bob Morton, there was no follow-up season where a new sample needed testing. Unlike Ryan Skinner, there was no ongoing role he was hoping to expand. John Gillum's entire Blind Frog Ranch story fits into a single, tightly contained mission. Get the team down the cliff, get them back up safely, and go home. Sometimes that's all a guest appearance needs to be.
Because everything on the sides is going to take quite a long time for me to be able to go through it properly and catalog it.
Right.
Our objective is to find that underground entrance.
Yeah, good stuff.
Jack W. Peters. He wasn't just another one-episode expert filling airtime. He was already a familiar face to treasure hunting show fans long before Blind Frog Ranch ever brought him in. That was Jack W. Peters, a professional explosives specialist who had built his television career blasting his way through other Discovery and Netflix treasure shows, including Discovery's Treasure Quest and Netflix's Pirate Gold of Adak Island, before Dwayne's crew ever called him. His job on the ranch wasn't small. In Season 3, Peters and his team were brought in to handle a controlled explosion at the miner's shack, clearing away a layer of soil so the crew could reach a suspected cavern entrance. He and his team placed 3 10-pound hand charges, ran the trigger line back to a safe distance, and let Chad Olinger set it off. But the blast didn't go clean. The rock above the target site cracked and caved in, sending Dwayne back to the drawing board with a track hoe that immediately hit solid stone instead of open ground. Rather than write the whole operation off, producers brought Peters back a second time in the same season, this time for a bigger job, mapping out a 10-foot diameter blast zone and drilling 16 holes for dynamite charges around the shaft location. It was one of the more technically serious sequences the show had filmed, and Peters was the only person on set qualified to run it safely. Once that second blast was done, so was his run on the show. He never returned for a follow-up season, but unlike a lot of the guest experts we've covered, that's not because nobody wanted him back. It's because Peters already had his own steady lane in the genre. He's the guy multiple treasure hunting shows call when something needs to be blown up correctly. And Blind Frog Ranch was just one stop on a resume, built entirely around that one specialty. No falling out, no scandal, just a specialist doing his job twice in one season, then moving on to the next production that needed the same expertise. But stay with us because the next person on this list will surprise you.
All the work we've done has gotten us to this point. It feels like we're just one step away from finding, I mean, who knows? Maybe one of the biggest treasures literally in the entire world.
Scott Hunter. Now, to wrap up, this is the man most viewers never even saw. The person who built Blind Frog Ranch before a single camera ever rolled. Scott Hunter created the show, credited as developed by, across its first stretch of episodes in 2022, shaping the format that turned one family's treasure hunt into a Discovery hit. Before Blind Frog Ranch, Scott Hunter had already spent years at Karga 7 Pictures building over 100 hours of programming across major networks: History, National Geographic, Netflix, Investigation Discovery. Blind Frog Ranch was one project on a much longer resume. Once the show found its footing and proved it could hold an audience, Hunter stepped into a bigger role at the Intellectual Property Corporation. developing shows across the industry instead of staying tied to just one property in Utah. So you see, Blind Frog Ranch is still airing. New caves, new seasons, new mysteries. But it was guys like Scott Hunter, working far from the cameras, who made the whole thing real in the moments that mattered most, long before anyone ever heard Dwayne say the word Aztec. Which of these people do you miss the most? Let us know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Click on the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.